Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. Okay, so let's just go through. We were discussing yesterday. We had the last text we had was what? We had reached here, and we said here, we had mahallun qareeb and mahallun ba'id. So what does that mean? Let's explain this. If I have the word here, like the sentence, Laysa Ahmadu qa'iman. Now, in this example, what's the i'rab of qa'iman? What's the i'rab of this? Who can tell me? Is mansoob lafzan. Now, if you look at this carefully, this has we say mansoob, right? We say mansoob, right? We say mansoob bil fatha. But the reason we don't have like multiple layers is because like it's a slot of a mansoob, isn't it? Because the khabar of laysa is mansoob, so the slot is also mansoob, and the lafz is also mansoob. So really, in theory, we can put a line through mahallan. We put a line through mansoobun lafzan because mansoob means both. The slot is mansoob and the word is mansoob. Does that make sense? When we have laysa ahmadu biqa'imin, how do we do i'rab of this? We go on and we mention that we say, but now because the mahal and the lafz is different, we mention both the mansoob mahallan and majroor lafzan. We say here it's mansoob mahallan. It's mansoob mahallan because it's the khabar of. It's khabar of laysa. Because of being khabar of laysa, what happens? It becomes mansoob mahallan, and because of the harfun jar ba, it becomes majroor lafzan. Everybody with me? This is what we've done so far. This is the stuff we covered. It's a recap. Is it clear to everybody? Yes? Now, the issue comes about if we have a mabni word. Okay? Now, if I say laysa ahmad, laysu. Subhanallah. And all about laysu, it's supposed to be laysa, but yeah, you guys know that much, not laysu, laysa. Right? So if we have here laysa ahmadu dhaka, Ahmad is not that person, Ahmad is not that, whatever you want to say. Okay? So now, what's happening in dhaka? If you look in dhaka, we have two things as well. Because everything has a mahal and a love. So it's mansoob mahallan, and we will mention mansoob mahallan. Now we don't say lafzan. What do? We just mention the alamatul bina. We just mention what's mabni upon, don't we? Because it doesn't have an i'rab lafzi. Because mabni, we just say, okay, it's mabni al-fath. So here we say mansoobun mahallan. Say laysa ahmadu dhaka. Ahmad is not that person that I am seeking. Okay? You understand this? Now, yes, everybody with me? Right. Now when we come over here, laysa ahmadu bidhaka. We have a bit of an issue now because what's the slot of bidhaka, of dhaka here? What's the slot of it? What's the mahallan? It's mansoob mahallan. But then when you look at so now here, what we say here is that because the first slot is mansoob. Let's go over here. We say it is going to be mansoob. This is khabar laysa, isn't it? It's khabar of laysa. Right? So therefore, the slot is going to be what? What's the slot going to be? What's the slot going to be? Mansoob. So really, what is supposed to have been is really mansoobun mahallan. Right? And it's going to be what? Mansoobun mahallan. And I made a mistake here. So here, the mahallan is supposed to be what? Mansoob, like this, you see here? Mansoob mahallan, majroor lafzan. It's supposed to be majroor. What's supposed to be majroor? Lafzan, isn't it? Are you following? Does that make sense? That's what's supposed to be in red, yes? You following? But because when we have a mabni word, we don't have a lafzi i'rab. We just say mahalli all the time. Are you following? So you have really is what? I'rab lafzi. If there's no i'rab lafzi, it becomes what? I'rab mahalli. That was stuff we do, don't we? And if it has two, say i'rab lafzan one, mahallan one. But if it's a mabni word, we start with mahall. So we have lafzi is level 1, and if need be, we move down to level 2. Yes? And then, you following? So in this mabni word, we say mahallan is mansoob, but there's no lafz. So instead of saying replace the mahal, and we say mahallan ba'idan. Yes? And the i'rab lafzi, we replace that by saying mahallan qariban. Are you following? So basically, we have i'rab lafzi and i'rab mahalli of mu'rab words. And in most cases, like this example here, it's both the same. The mansub, so you don't have to say mahallan and lafzan. You just say mansub or majroor in most cases. If you have a harf min jar za'id, or you have like another like idafa structure, etc., what would you say then? You say, okay, mansub mahallan, majroor lafzan. So you have two i'rab, the mansub, the mahalli i'rab and the lafzi i'rab. But because in mu'rab, in mabni words, in here, in mabni words, you don't have i'rab lafzi. So you express the i'rab mahalli as mahalli ba'id, and you use the word mahalli qareeb for the lafzan. Does that make sense? So let's look at another example here. So if we have a lafz which is mu'rab, it has an i'rab mahalli and it has an i'rab lafzi, correct? So every word has i'rab lafzi and i'rab mahalli. In a normal mu'rab word, do we need to say i'rab lafzi and i'rab mahalli? Yes or no? No. Why don't we have to say mahalli and lafzi i'rab? Because when you say mansub, it encompasses both. So for example, you have here, if we have for example rajulun, yes, we say marfu. We don't say marfu mahallan, marfu lafzan, because it's the same. Yes, we just say marfu and we know that includes both of them. Yes, so far so good. If it's a mabni word, it has an i'rab mahallan, but it doesn't have an i'rab lafzi. Why? Because it's mabni. So instead of saying the i'rab lafzi, we just explain what's it mabni upon. So for example, dhaka, you would say, dhaka is i'rab marfu mahallan, but it's mabni al-fath. So far so good. So for example, if you say here, laysa ahmadu qa'iman. So here we say here, qa'iman is mansub mahallan and mansub lafzan. We don't need to say all of these words because when you say mansub, it includes everything. If we say laysa ahmadu dhaka, Ahmad is not that person that I'm looking for. Then we say here, mahallan is mansub, and it doesn't have a lafzi i'rab because it's not mu'rab. We just explain what the alamatul bina is. Correct? Yes? If we have a harfun jar za'id, this is an example, there's other scenarios as well. If you have for example, laysa ahmadu biqa'imin. Now what happens in here now? We have an i'rab mahalli and you have an i'rab, you have to mention both. Because the i'rab mahalli is what? Mansub, and the i'rab lafzi is what? Majroor, because the harfun jar za'id. Correct? Now when we come over here, laysa ahmadu bidhaka. Now what happens in here now? The i'rab mahalli, we change the name to i'rab mahalli ba'id. Why? Because we need another slot for i'rab lafzi, because it doesn't have mu'rab words, mabni words don't have i'rab lafzi. We have to say, we call this mahalli qareeb. So mahalli qareeb is basically the equivalent of lafzi, and mahalli ba'id is the equivalent of the mahalli. And then you mention the alamatul bina. So in here we will say, laysa ahmadu bidhaka. Dhaka is, so as we say here, is mansubun mahallan ba'idan, meaning because the khabaru laysa. And what's the i'rab mahalli qareeb is majroorun mahallan qareeban, because of it's majroor of ba, and it's mabni al-fath. Are you following me? Does that make sense? So now the question is that this only happens for ism al-ishara? No. We say that this happens for any ism which this rule of having i'rab mahalli qareeb and i'rab mahalli ba'id can apply to any ism which has i'rabul mahalli. And which nouns have i'rab mahalli? We've done this already in al-sughra, in the maqsid al-thalith fil i'rab, in i'rab ism al-mahalli. And 3 words of i'rab mahalli. What are they? Can you find them? Al-ism al-mu'awwal, al-ism al-mu'rab, al-mushtaghil akhiruhu bi'irab lafdhiyin, and ism al-mabni. So if you have ism al-mu'awwal with harf masdar and the sila, or you have a word with a harf jar when it has a mudaf ilay, or ism al-mabni. In these 3 cases, you can have i'rab mahalli qareeb and i'rab mahalli ba'id. Are you following? And we will go through when it comes. So for example now, if we go back to our example here. So in this example, what do we have? We have ma kana Allah, we've done all of this, we've done that, we've done that, we've done this. Now, liyadhlima, what happens in liyadhlima? Lam is a harafun jar za'id, lamul juhud for emphasis. So we say here now, what's hidden here? What's hidden in here? the particle an is hidden. So an al-muqaddar, not al-muqaddar, an al-muqaddaratu. An al-muqaddar. So this is supposed to be an al-muqaddaratu. So an al-muqaddara wa ma ba'da ismun mu'awwal. And ismun mu'awwal has i'rab lafzi, taqdiri wa mahalli. Has i'rab? It has i'rab mahalli. So now therefore, we will say the mahal ba'id is mansub. Why? Because this lam is za'id. That means that this becomes what? Khabar? Khabru kana. What's the i'rab of khabru kana? So the mansub mahallan is what? Mansub mahallan and majroorun what? Lafzan, isn't it? Originally. But because it's a mabni word, we change mahallan to what? Mahallan ba'idan, and we change lafzan to what? Mahallan qariban. Does that make sense? So in here, kana is fi'l naqis, lafz jalala is the ism, lam is za'ida, yadhlima ahadan is a khabar. But not the yadhlima with the an. So that ismun mu'awwal becomes a khabar. So now the khabar has two i'rabs. One is the i'rab based on the slot, which is mansoob, and one i'rab based on the lam, which is majroor. We call the first i'rab the mahalli, the second the lafzi. But because it's ismun mu'awwal, you can't have lafzi, so you have mahalli qareeb and mahalli ba'id. Mahalli ba'id is basically what the mahal would have been. And the mahal qareeb is what the lafz would have been. So you say here, mahallan ba'idan is mansoob because it's khabar of kana, and it's majroor mahallan qareeban because of the lam za'ida. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes, is it clear? Okay, now let me explain one thing to you here now. What we were doing, we said here we have an ism, for example. Okay? So when the ism occurs in a sentence, what does it have? What does it have? It'll have an i'rab, correct? Are you following? So when the ism comes in a sentence, it has an i'rab, okay? It'll always have an i'rab. And by default, is it i'rab lafzi or i'rab mahalli? By default, the ism lafzi. So the first time the ism will have i'rabun lafziyun, okay? Yes? Make sense? Yes? Understood? Okay. However, if the word is mabni, what do we say? What do we say? It has what i'rab? I'rab mahalli. So mahalli is then second level if you don't have i'rab. So for example, the word zaydun or the word rajulun will have i'rab lafzi. The word hadha will have i'rab mahalli. So far, so good? Is this we've done before? Yes? Following? Everybody with me? Okay. However, let's say for example, we have a harfun jar zaid on harfun jar zaid on rajul. Let's say for example, we had here min rajulin, and min zaida or harfu sila, and it comes on rajul. What happens now to rajul? What does it have? How many i'rabs does it have? It has two. What will it have? I'rab lafzi, and it also have what i'rab? What? Mahalli. Yes? Are you following? Yes? Do you understand? What if we have the word hadha, or we have a mabni word, and that mabni word has a harfun jar zaid before it? Because what happens? A word with an i'rab lafzi, if it has a harfun jar zaid before it, we say okay, it has an i'rab lafzi and an i'rab mahalli. Didn't we say that? Yes? Are you following what I'm saying? So for example, ma ja'a ahadun. What's the i'rab of ahadun? Lafzi or mahalli? Is lafzi. If I say ma ja'a min ahadin, what happens now? Min ahadin. What's the i'rab of ahad? Does it have one i'rab or two i'rabs? Two i'rabs. I'rab what? Lafzi and i'rab mahalli. Okay. But what if we have, let's say for example, this is not correct, but for argument's sake, if this was min hadha, If you say ma ja'a hadha, ma ja'a hadha. So hadha has got i'rab lafzi or i'rab mahalli? Hadha i'rab mahalli. If, for example, said ma ja'a min hadha, that's not correct, right? But does it have lafzi? No, it doesn't have a lafzi at all, does it? It have mahalli 1 and mahalli 2, wouldn't it? Because it has two i'rabs. So you go from lafzi to mahalli. But if it's already mahalli, you go from mahalli. Now you have two types of mahalli. You have mahalli qareeb, and then we have mahalli what? Ba'id. You following? So lafzi is the one you can see in the words, and mahalli is a slot i'rab. And that's simple throughout 99% of the cases, or 95% of the cases. The issue comes about now, and if you have a harfun jar zaid, then you say, okay, lafzi is this, mahalli is this. In word is this, and mahallan is this. But we also call a harfun jar, but if there's a harfun jar before a mabni word, then the first i'rab is already mahalli. Are you following? This is level 1, level 2, and now you're making a level 3. So you do the level 1 i'rab as a base, then you move to level 2 i'rab. So use level 1 if possible. Rajulun ja'a rajulun marfu' lafzan. If it's ja'a hadha, there's no lafzi, you say mahalli. So it's i'rab mahalli. When you have harfun jar zaid, it has two i'rabs, level 1 and level 2, which is what? Ma ja'a min ahadin. So now you have lafzi and you have mahalli. But if the word is mahalli, then you have to say now at another level, another layer. You say mahalli qareeb and mahalli ba'id. Okay, subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika. Wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayka.